You know, the big subject that everybody is talking about today is the economy. And if you listen to all the politicians out there and all the experts on the news channels, you're going to find out really quick they don't have a clue what's going on or how to fix it. Now, generally, gearheads don't care anything about this because we figure that all politicians are lying anyway. But when the price of fuel went over $4 a gallon, people started to take notice. All of a sudden, fuel economy became a hot topic. And that brings up the #1 question that we get emails about. How do you get better fuel economy out of newer model vehicles with some simple upgrades? Is that even possible? And what about alternative fuels? Are those even a viable option? What's the deal? That's what we're going to look at today. Now, when it comes to getting better mileage, there are some tips out there like keeping your tires properly inflated and not driving too fast and no jackrabbit starts, things like that they talk about on talk shows. But those are just tips. They're only going to do you so much. No, we're talking about actual products that you can put on that will give you significantly better mileage and performance. Now, those products are out there. Just finding the ones that do what they say they're going to do is the trick. So, today we're going to show you the top 6 things that you can do to a late model vehicle that are affordable that will give you better mileage when you're cruising, better performance when you stomp the gas. Okay, most people realize that an engine is basically just a big air pump. The more air goes in and out, the better it runs. And that means better fuel economy and performance. So the first thing we recommend doing is upgrading your air inlet and your filter, especially on these newer vehicles because they are so restrictive. Take a look at this. All the air for the engine comes in this tiny tube, goes into this box, has to be sucked up through the filter, goes through another restrictive tube down into the engine. That is not enough air for a V8. Basically what you've got here is an engine with asthma, and it's killing your economy. A new inlet and filter will fix that problem. Now obviously there's a lot of these sort of products on the market, but when you start comparing numbers and really looking at things, you're going to find that K&N comes out on top every time with their high flowing filter, their non-restrictive tubing, the way everything fits, and the way they stand behind their products. Look at this. This is going to flow way more air than that stock system ever thought. Now, since we are talking about new vehicles and products that anybody can put on, it's very important how easy this goes on. And basically, if you know which end of a screwdriver goes in the screw, you can put one of these on.
That's incorrect.
The next upgrade is even simpler to do and just as effective, and that is upgrading your computer with a programmer. Now, there are some questions that come up about these things. The 2 main ones are, do they really work, and how do they work? Well, it's pretty simple. Unlike something like this that's got carburetors sitting on it, today's modern fuel-injected vehicles are controlled by a computer, and they are not tuned from the factory to give you the best performance or fuel efficiency. So there's a lot of improvement out there just waiting for you to get your hands on it. The programmer will allow you to go in and change the parameters and the shift points and the fuel and the spark and all those little things that add up to a big deal. Something like that is definitely worth investing in. And Hypertech, Superchips, Predator, they've all got a good piece. Now, the best part is, all you have to do is plug this into the diagnostic port of the vehicle, and if you've got the ability to push buttons, you can install one of these. The third simple upgrade we're going to look at has to do with a fire in the engine, and that happens through the lowly spark plug. Now, the design of the spark plug's been around for like 100 years, and it's basically a couple of electrodes with a gap between them. The spark happens in the gap, and of course that ignites your fuel and gives you your power. The problem is, if this thing isn't burning all your fuel, you're flushing some of it down the toilet. And these are notorious for doing that because they get old. I mean, the gap gets out, they get fouled. I mean, there's any number of reasons. So what are you gonna do? You don't wanna put this back in there. Well, there is a new design in spark plugs. Take a look at this. This is a new plug from E3, and you can see it looks completely different than this conventional style plug. Notice the outer electrode almost looks like a cage that goes around the center electrode. Then you've got this diamond-shaped hole cut in the end. That allows the flame to blow out into the cylinder and burn the fuel more completely. Also, you don't have to gap these, and they don't foul as easily as these old plugs either. Now, I know that sounds simple, but believe it or not, these little rascals will actually make a difference, especially driving around town. And if you can figure out how to use a ratchet, you can put in your own spark plugs.
That's incorrect.
The fourth upgrade is the simplest yet, and probably the easiest to overlook, and that is converting to synthetic oils. Now, I know this brings up a lot of red flags for everybody because we've all heard over the years about these fantastic oils that are supposed to do all this stuff, so it's hard to know what the truth is. So let's take a look at what's going on here. Now, obviously, in any vehicle, you got a lot of mechanical parts in the rear end and the transmission and in the engine, and they're all rotating against each other, causing drag and friction. Now, if you could reduce the amount of drag and friction, it would take less fuel to turn the parts. And that is what a synthetic oil does. Now, when you're shopping for oils, get something good, get something that's got a reputation. I've been using Royal Purple for years, and this stuff actually does what it says it's gonna do. Also, make sure you change the fluids in the differential, the transmission, the transfer case, and the engine if you want to get the full benefit out of swapping to synthetic fluids. The best part is, if you can pull a drain plug and pour a bottle, you can change your own fluids. You know, ever since the economy started tanking and the price of gas started going crazy, we have been bombarded with requests about doing a show on fuel mileage. So we put together a list of 6 things that are easy to do, affordable, and will give you better fuel economy and performance. Now, we've already covered the air intake to get air in. We've covered the computer upgrades for electronics. We've covered spark plugs for more fire. And we've covered synthetic oils to reduce drag and friction. The next 2 things have to do with getting air out of the engine. Now, like we said before, your engine is just basically a big fancy air pump. But getting air in is only part of the battle. No, you got to get the air out just as effectively, or the engine's going to fall on its face. And that brings up upgrade number 5, the Catback Exhaust System. Okay, so what is a Catback Exhaust System? Well, just like the name implies, it's a system that runs back of the catalytic converters. So on a car like this, it would run back here, start right there at the seam, and replace all the tubing, the restrictive mufflers, everything. The cool thing about a catback system, like these from Cherry Bomb, is that these are designed and built to fit exactly what you're working on. Let's take a look. Notice all of your hangers are welded right to the performance muffler, as well as the stainless steel tips. So this is gonna fit right, it's gonna look right, and it's gonna sound right. Then, all your tubing is pre-bent, your hangers are welded on, and you also get all the hangers and clamps to actually mount this under the car. Because the point here is that they want you to be able to install this stuff. Now, all this adds up to better flow, less back pressure, and that means you're gonna get the performance and the fuel economy that you're after. The best part is though, if you've got a standard set of tools, don't mind laying on your back for an afternoon, you can install a catback system. Now, if you're seriously considering this, there's something else that is very restrictive in your exhaust that you need to deal with. The catalytic converters. Now, if you replace your stock cats with these high-flowing cats, you're really gonna open up your exhaust system. Of course, replacing your cats is more expensive and more labor-intensive than just doing a catback, but the benefits are definitely worth it. The final upgrade also has to do with getting air out of the engine, and that's headers. And of the 6 things we've shown you, this is the toughest thing to do. But it's something every one of you guys can do. Now, you might be thinking, why would I need a set of headers? And what kind of headers would I need? Let's go take a look. This is a typical stock exhaust manifold. And as you can see, the exhaust comes in here, tries to make a 90-degree turn, and head out this little hole. So you've got all kinds of turbulence and back pressure building in here. This was not a good design. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that something like this, with its 4 individual tubes, is gonna way outflow something like that. Now, this is a shorty style header. This is something you'd use on a street rod or a street machine or even a late model vehicle. Any place where space is tight, that's where you'd want to use a shorty header. Now, another style of header is the long tube design. Now, this is the one everybody used on their muscle cars back in the day because they built all kinds of incredible torque and horsepower with those long tubes. All right, another style of header is the competition header. Now, this is a long tube design, but you could always tell a competition header by the size of the tubes. I mean, look at those. That obviously isn't going to fit on just anything. Now, anytime we're talking about headers, the reason we recommend hooker headers is they have been around since pretty much the beginning. They pretty much invented it. And they've got headers for every application you can imagine. So if you need headers, hooker's the place to go. And that takes care of the 6 upgrades that everybody has been wanting to see to give you better fuel mileage. Now, obviously, if you can afford to do all 6 of these, you're going to get the biggest benefit out of it. But if you can only afford to do 1 or 2, that's still money well spent. You know, these days you hear a lot of talk about alternative fuels. I mean, everybody's talking about hybrids and hydrogen and electrical and all that stuff. And that's a good thing. But could it be that part of the answer to this problem is right in front of our faces, down at your local fast food store? Well, probably not. But then again, Rudolph Diesel did design the diesel engine to be an alternative fuels engine. His first one ran on peanut oil. And there's a lot of leftover grease when you make something like this. But is it possible to run a diesel engine on the leftover cooking oil from doing something like this? Well, it is possible, and that is what we're going to show you. Now, a few years ago, we did a show on how to make your own biodiesel fuel, and that's cool, but there's a couple of drawbacks to that. Number 1, you have to buy a special machine to make the fuel, and number 2, you actually have to make the fuel. Now, we're talking about going to the next step here and actually running on straight cooking oil. Now, obviously, to do something like this, you're going to have a setup on your rig that actually makes the vehicle compatible to run on straight cooking oil. And nobody does that like Dyno Fuel Alternatives. Let's take a look. This is their Veggie Ram system. Same system they have on their show truck, same one that you get when you buy one. Now, as you can see, this is a pretty simple deal. It's not a lot here, but we're going to walk you through it because I know there's a lot of you that do not think that this is possible. Now, if you're going to run an alternative fuel, obviously you have to have an auxiliary tank. So that is what this is, even though it looks like a toolbox, which on top, it actually is. But if you look right here, that's where your cooking oil goes in. You see you have your ins and outs for your fuel lines as well as your coolant lines. Now, we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Of course, your fuel all stays down here, and then this just bolts in the bed of the truck. Now, this manifold is what makes this system very unique. You have your coolant lines that run in, you have your stock fuel lines that run in, and you have your auxiliary fuel lines that run in. And this manifold controls everything. Now, basically, the way these systems work, once you start the engine, it starts to reach operating temperature, the coolant runs to the auxiliary tank and heats up the cooking oil. Then, when you're ready to run on it, you flip the switch, it switches over to cooking oil, and off you go. Now, the first question that most people have is, what kind of oil do you use? Well, obviously, this thing would run fantastic on brand new cooking oil. But we just came from the store, and this stuff was right at $8 a gallon. Yeah, we're going the wrong direction. So the only real option you've got is to get used cooking oil from a local restaurant. Take a look. Nah, it's too nasty. Ooh, stinky. Phew, this is not for the weakest stomach. Fortunately, this truck came from Kelderman with a full tank of used cooking oil. It smells like French fries and wings. So we get to skip the step of collecting all that old nasty oil and filtering it and move right to the real question that's on everybody's mind. How well does this stuff actually run? Well, let's go find out. And we'll take this as an auxiliary fuel can. Now that is amazing. We are getting just as much power out of old used cooking oil as we got out of petroleum diesel fuel. And it's better for your engine because it lubricates better. Now, you will have a little bit of a drop in your miles per gallon, about 2 to 3%, depending on the oil and the cleanliness of it, but that's tiny. And the fact that the oil's free means that doesn't really matter anyway. The real point here, though, is that we have taken a waste product and turned it into a viable alternative fuel, and that is cool. Now, if we could just figure out how to do that with all the hot air coming from those politicians, that would be really cool.
Tool Tech, brought to you by Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals since 1919.
You know, when it comes to tools, there's some that you need and some that you just wish you had. But if you work on vehicles, you have got to have the ability to connect two pieces of metal together. That's where a welder comes in. Now, a few weeks ago, we talked about the MIG welder, its versatility, and the fact that you should have one in your shop. But whenever you start talking about welders, invariably the subject of the TIG welder comes up. But the question is, what exactly is a TIG welder? How does it compare to the MIG? And more importantly, do you need one? That is what we're going to take a look at. Now, just a few years ago, if you wanted to get into a TIG welder, well, you not only spent a fortune, but you ended up with something that was huge. Man, it looked like something out of Frankenstein's castle. Not anymore. This little Diversion 165 from Miller is not only small and affordable, but it also has the power to weld up to 3/16" steel, making it perfect for a fab shop. Now, Miller's also taken all the guesswork out of the setup of one of these things, because all you have to do is flip the switch for the type of metal you're welding and then dial in the thickness. Okay, the biggest difference between the MIG and the TIG is that with a MIG, you've got your torch. When you pull the trigger, it strikes an arc, feeds the wire, and releases shielding gas all at the same time. So all you worry about is running a bead. With a TIG, on the other hand, all you've got is the torch. Basically, what you do is create a puddle of molten metal, and then the filler material you add as you go along. So you're going to be using both hands, one of your feet, and both eyes to do this. Here's what's involved. You control the power from the welder with a foot switch or with this knob up here on the torch. Basically, the more you push down on the switch or rotate the knob, the more power you get to the tip. This gives you great control over the welder. That takes care of the foot. All right, with the torch held lightly in one hand, very similar to the way you'd hold a pencil, you just rock it back, then you come down to your workpiece and tilt the torch back about 15 to 20 degrees and keep about a 1/16 of an inch of a gap between the tip and the piece of metal. You never want to touch the tungsten to the metal. Then you just get down on your foot switch, you'll create an arc and you'll build a puddle of molten metal. Then you take your filler rod and you dab it to the outer edge of the puddle as you move the torch. The heat from the weld will pull the metal right into the weld and you're moving along. Now, you never want to touch the tip of the tungsten to the filler rod either, because if you do, you've contaminated the tungsten, you got to take it out, grind another tip on it. Now, you might be looking at this going, gosh, you know, that doesn't look too bad. Well, there is a little more to it than this. You got to know how much heat to add, got to know how fast to move the torch, you got to know what size rod to use, you got to know about your metal. So there's some things you do need to know. But don't think for a second you can't do this. All you got to do is get yourself a TIG and practice, practice, practice. And you have to use it in the proper application. There is a time to use a MIG, and then there's a time to use a TIG. And we're going to go into that in some segments later on. But for now, here's something to keep in mind. A TIG does not do well filling gaps, and it doesn't do well with rusty or nasty metal. That's where a MIG is so much better. That's why with restorations you have floor pans and rocker panels usually going in with a MIG. But if you're doing a lot of fabrication, doing a lot of precise tight welds on aluminum, titanium, steel, stainless steel, that is where a TIG comes in. If this is the type of stuff you're doing, you need to get a TIG.
And now, what are you working on?
Today's What Are You Working On comes from a Brian Denning of Benton, Arkansas, and he has got a 1969 Volkswagen Westfalia camper bus. Take a look at this thing. He said it's got everything, including the kitchen sink. That's cool. Now, he said the first thing that he added was Pergo hardwood flooring. Take a look at this. He did the flooring even before he did his seats or the rest of the interior. Now, he said that the whole reason he bought this thing is so he could take it camping. So here's a picture of Brian out camping using his vehicle for what he intended to. That is cool. Now, he says he and a buddy rebuilt the stock 1600cc engine, and it is now kicking out a whopping 56 horsepower, which won't get you anywhere fast, but it will get you there, and that's all Brian cares about. Now, he said the best thing about owning a Volkswagen over any other hot rod, because he's had a bunch, he said, is that they're truly easy to work on, and you can't go anywhere without running into somebody that doesn't know about Volkswagens. He said the Volkswagen community is huge, and that is true. Now, this is an example of a guy that actually bought a vehicle, he had it in mind, knew what he wanted to do with it, and he's doing it. And if you don't like it, he doesn't really care. That is cool. Now, the rest of you guys, we know you're working on something. Get out there, take some pictures of it, send them into gearstv.com. We'll see if we can get them on the air. All right, that takes care of it for us for today. We're going to start working on some other stuff next week. We'll see you then.